Run your fingertips along your jaw right now. Notice anything? A slight tightness near the ear maybe, or a tension along the temple you didn't clock until this exact second. Most people carry that tension around all day without ever touching it, let alone releasing it. There's a technique for that. It costs nothing, takes about 5 minutes, and doesn't involve a single product you haven't already got in your bathroom. Skincare marketing has a funny habit of making everything sound like it needs to be purchased. A serum for this, a device for that, a treatment for the other thing. But long before any of those existed, there was a hands-on facial technique practiced in Japan called Kobido, originally developed for the imperial court, later passed down through generations of practitioners, and still used today by people who've simply never stopped believing their own hands could do something useful. This isn't a story about a miracle cure, and it isn't a claim that this replaces a dermatologist, a facialist, or medical treatment for a genuine skin concern. It's a story about a specific physical technique with a real, explainable mechanism behind it. One that a lot of professional skincare conversations simply skip past. Not because it's a secret, but because there's no product to sell alongside it. Let's get into what it actually does, because the why here matters more than the ritual itself. Puffiness in the morning, especially around the jaw, under the eyes, and along the cheeks, is very often related to fluid that has settled overnight rather than drained away. Your lymphatic system, the network responsible for clearing that fluid, doesn't have a pump the way your circulatory system does. It relies on movement, gravity, and gentle pressure to keep things flowing. Sleep, especially lying flat for hours, gives fluid time to pool in the face rather than continuing to drain. This is a completely normal, unremarkable part of being human, not a sign that anything is wrong, and it happens to nearly everyone to some degree, regardless of age. A short facial massage, done with the right direction and a light touch, works with this system rather than against it. Movements generally start at the center of the face and sweep outward and upward toward the lymph nodes near the ears and along the neck, which is where that fluid actually needs to go to drain properly. This is worth repeating because it's the detail most people get backward without realizing it. Pressing or pulling downward toward the jaw and chin works against the natural direction fluid needs to travel, and over years of repeated motion in the wrong direction, that habit may do more harm than good, particularly for skin that's already lost some of its natural elasticity. Consider a woman who's spent decades absent-mindedly rubbing her face downward while applying moisturizer, the same motion every single morning without ever questioning the direction. She isn't doing anything dramatic or damaging in a single instance, but small, repeated choices made thousands of times over years tend to add up to something noticeable eventually in either direction. Learning the correct direction once and applying it consistently costs nothing extra. It simply requires unlearning a habit that was never actually chosen on purpose in the first place. Here's a simple version worth trying, and it doesn't require special tools. Start at the center of the forehead and sweep outward toward the temples with light pressure from your fingertips. Move to the area under the eyes and sweep gently outward, never dragging or pulling the delicate skin there. Along the cheeks, sweep from the nose outward toward the ears. Along the jawline, sweep from the chin toward the ears rather than the other way around. Finish by gently sweeping down the sides of the neck, since this is the direction lymph fluid needs to travel to actually drain. I've written a guide that compiles the daily habits Japanese women have followed for generations to age more slowly, stay active, and maintain healthy skin and a strong body well into their 80s. It's called Still Young in Japan, and I'd love to help you do the same. Right now, the guide is 98 pages long, but everyone who purchases it this month will receive all new chapters added over the next few weeks completely free of charge. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your copy and start aging on your own terms today. The entire sequence takes about 5 minutes, and applying a facial oil first, something light like camellia oil, allows your fingers to glide rather than tug at the skin, which matters more than people expect, since dragging dry skin can create unnecessary friction and irritation over time. None of this needs to be perfect to be worthwhile. The pressure involved is closer to what you'd use to test a piece of fruit for ripeness than anything approaching deep tissue work. And if a movement feels like it's stretching or pulling the skin rather than sliding smoothly across it, that's usually a sign to ease off or add a little more oil rather than push through it. There's no single correct number of repetitions either. 2 or 3 passes over each area is generally enough for the fluid to start moving. challenging, and more isn't necessarily better once the basic motion has been done. Timing is worth thinking about too, because morning and evening serve slightly different purposes here. In the morning, this kind of massage can help reduce the visible puffiness that built up overnight, which for a lot of women becomes more noticeable with age as skin loses some of its ability to bounce back quickly. In the evening, the same technique, done after cleansing and with a bit of facial oil, can double as a way to consciously release the tension that's accumulated in the jaw and forehead over the course of a stressful day, tension that a lot of people carry without ever noticing it until someone tells them to check. That tension point deserves its own moment, honestly, because it's rarely discussed outside of specific therapeutic contexts. Chronic, unconscious clenching in the jaw, furrowing in the brow, or tightness around the temples is extremely common, especially for anyone dealing with ongoing stress, screen time, or simply the accumulated habits of a busy life. A facial massage practiced regularly gives you a reason to actually notice that tension, which is often the first step toward releasing it. This isn't purely cosmetic. It's closer to a small daily check-in with a part of your body most people never think to pay attention to at all. There's a question worth asking honestly here. Why does a technique with a real, explainable mechanism behind it get so little airtime compared to serums and devices costing considerably more? Part of the answer is simply pressure and touch aren't easy to package into a 30-second advertisement, and a technique that requires learning a specific direction and building a habit doesn't lend itself to a quick before and after photo the way a new cream does. That doesn't make it less legitimate, it just makes it less marketable, which turns out to be a very different thing. It's also worth mentioning who this isn't necessarily suited for without a bit of extra caution. Anyone with active acne, a skin infection, rosacea flare-ups, or a recent cosmetic procedure like filler or a chemical peel should check with a dermatologist before adding facial massage into a routine, since increased blood flow and pressure to compromised or freshly treated skin isn't always appropriate. This is a small, sensible caveat rather than a reason to avoid the practice altogether for most people. It's worth being completely honest about what this can and can't do. A facial massage, however consistent, doesn't erase wrinkles permanently, doesn't replace collagen the skin has lost over decades, and isn't a substitute for medical treatment if you have specific skin concerns, persistent swelling, or changes that seem unusual rather than the ordinary morning puffiness most people experience. What the research and general dermatological understanding do support is more modest, temporary reduction in fluid retention, a general sense of relaxation in facial muscles, and improved circulation to the area, benefits that are real but not permanent, and that depend on consistency rather than a single session. There's also a reason this particular technique gets so little attention in mainstream skincare conversations, and it's worth naming plainly rather than framing as some grand conspiracy. It doesn't come with a price tag. There's no device to market, no serum to bundle alongside it, no subscription to sell. A 5-minute technique using only your own hands simply doesn't fit neatly into a business model built around recurring purchases, which is a very different thing from it being hidden or suppressed. It's less a secret and more an afterthought, the kind of practical, low-cost advice that tends to get crowded out by things that are easier to sell. None of this is about presenting Japan as the sole origin of facial massage, since hands-on facial techniques exist in many cultures, from gua sha's Chinese origins to various European facial massage traditions developed independently over centuries. What's genuinely useful here isn't the specific country, it's the underlying principle, a free, physical technique with a real, explainable mechanism, overlooked mostly because nobody profits from teaching it to you. It's also fair to say that consistency matters more here than intensity ever will. A single, deep, enthusiastic session won't undo weeks of downward rubbing, and pressing harder isn't the same as pressing correctly. The lymphatic system responds to light, repeated, directional movement rather than force, which is part of why this technique tends to reward patience over effort. 5 gentle minutes practiced most days will very likely do more than 15 intense minutes practiced once a month and then forgotten. If there's one habit worth building from this, it's simpler than it sounds. 5 minutes, correct direction, a little facial oil, done consistently rather than perfectly, morning or evening or both, whichever fits your actual life. It won't turn back the clock, and nobody honest should tell you it will, but it might offer something quietly valuable that a lot of expensive routines miss entirely. A few minutes each day where you're paying attention to your own face with your own 2 hands, rather than waiting for a product to do it for you. That, in the end, might be worth more than the ritual itself. Healthy aging was never really about finding the one thing that fixes everything. It's about the small, attentive habits that remind you your body is still worth showing up for, one ordinary 5-minute routine at a time. Try it once, tonight, without expecting anything dramatic. Notice what your jaw feels like before you start, and again, 5 minutes later. That small difference, however modest, is usually enough reason to try it again tomorrow.